I'm back. Since it is me at the time I'm recording this, everybody is moving back to Battlefront. But since I got a lifetime ban from all EA products, I have to go with the second best choice. And that is every divorced dad's top movie ever, Robocop. This game was a free monthly game a couple of months ago. This game's platinum consists of a 3 out of 10 out of difficulty, one playthrough taking 12 hours. And this game also has a total trophy count of 28 with no missable trophies. This game first starts off listening to the news, where almost immediately after watching a little bit of it, it gets taken over by this gang called the Vultures. This gang basically consists of methed out rock stars, but instead of being good, they're kind of like the MGK kind. And all of them have really bad cuts. Like, what am I looking at right now? And then this gang leader basically explains that he is trying to take over the city of Detroit. Why is everything bad in Detroit? And then he explains he is holding hostages and he has a large amount of drugs. And this new drug is called Nuke. This then starts the first mission of the game, and that is going after the gang leader holding everybody captive. The start of the first chapter has you meeting up with your partner, Lewis. Then both of you go into the building to defuse the situation. And this starts the first combat section of the game. This game's combat is very different from a regular first-person shooter. This is because Robocop is more slower and he's also more tankier. And he has the turning movement of a 1940s John Deere tractor. And then once after defeating all the enemies, you make it to the next area of the game, where we see the first trophy of the playthrough. The trophy is for literally shooting a dude right in the dick. And then afterwards you make your way up through an elevator up to the top level. You fight a couple of enemies and then save some hostages. But afterwards we get another trophy for absolutely decking this dude with a TV. And then you move on to the next room filled with hostages. And one of the hostages also may not have survived. Then one of the Vulture gang members is holding somebody by gunpoint. And then Robocop just basically sat there like an incoherent retard. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that. That's what my teacher said to me the other day, so I think it's alright. And then Lewis comes and defeats the enemy. These so-called glitches come out through the game, getting worse and worse as the game progresses. We also get our next trophy of the playthrough for finishing the chapter. And then you make it back to the police station, where you have to talk to this therapist about all your glitches, which you have to do after every single chapter. And then once getting access to the cop station, I did some trophies. These are for getting different high scores at the shooting range, those being 150, 200, and 300 targets. And then almost immediately after starting the chapter, we get our next trophy, and this trophy is for putting a ticket on a car. In this chapter you go to an arcade because there's suspicion that there's a lot of drugs in the building. But you ask the manager, but he basically says that you need a search warrant. So you go around the arcade trying to find information. And then you see this kid tripping out in the bathroom, which grants you a search warrant. And then you make it to the basement of the arcade where you have to fight a decent amount of enemies. And to get to the manager's office where you breach and then eliminate all the threats in his office. Then you search his desk for any information that you could find. And then we get a trophy for unlocking a secret room. And then another trophy for retrieving all the rewards found inside. And then you make it to a location in this game called the Ghost House. You find out this place via the information found on the manager's desk. After making your way through a lot of dilapidated looking buildings, you find Scoot. Scoot is basically a middleman between the streets and the police. Scoot throughout the game gives you information about the Vultures. And he also gives you intel about a cop that has been missing. And then you go on a mission trying to get information about the missing officer, which just leads you to find his kid and other kids shooting a gun. And then you talk to his kid and get a lead about where he might be. This leads to you and Lewis go into an old slaughterhouse. And then you find a large group of enemies throughout the building, where after eliminating all of them, you go through a gate and then get absolutely ran over by a forklift. And then once after waking up, you meet the next enemy type in the game. And this is the first and last time you'll see these guys in the entire game. And then once after defeating the enemies, you make it to a concert. And then after a little bit of singing, the entire crowd turns on you. But I guess you're not allowed to kill the civilians. And then once killing all the enemies, you make it to Scoot, where you have to interrogate him by destroying all his fancy guitars. But then once Scoot talks, you take him outside the building. And then you meet the actual main bad guy in this game. He then kills Scoot and then shoots Lewis. Oh, while this is happening, Robocop is having another glitch. This is because the bad guy can control you with his lighter. And then we get a trophy for finishing the chapter. And then once getting back to the police station, you get a trophy for upgrading your pistol. I still really don't know how this works. And then you talk to your boss and he gives you a replacement for Lewis. And then you go to the basement to try to connect to the servers. This is so you can check Officer Briggs' last known location. Briggs is the officer that went missing. And then you make your way to the steel mill, his last known location. Then while in the steel mill you find blood on the floor. You then follow the blood splatter and then you reach your next enemy type of the game. These enemies ride motorcycles and you also get a trophy if you shoot their engines. And then in the exact same area, I got a trophy for blowing up 3 enemies with 1 explosion. And then you make it through the buildings of the steel mill. And then after defeating a couple enemies, you make it to their boss. He gives you information on where Briggs might be. He told you to go to the west point of the steel mill. You enter this building and you start glitching out again. Until you reach the end and you see a video of Briggs getting brutally beaten. And then you move to the north point of the steel mill. You enter a building where you see where Briggs was beaten and his body, along with many other cops. And then you talk to some reinforcements, and they explain that OCP sent of their droids over to help you. This makes Robocop a little bit pissed because he thinks he can do it himself. And then after making your way through the steel mill, you come across the Vulture's leader. But before you can take him out and bring him to prison, the other droid turns on you, killing his operator in the process. Then you as Robocop has to fight this big droid. This actually took a couple attempts to defeat, but once defeated, you get a trophy for finishing this chapter. And in the next chapter it starts where you go into the hospital to meet Lewis. And then once making it back to the police station, you learn that the OCP bank is being robbed. Then Robocop goes to the bank to try to defuse the situation. And then you and the OCP soldiers go into the bank to try to kill all the robbers. And they also supply some of the robots to help you. And then you make it to the bank vault and save the owner. And then he notifies you that there is a bomb on his chest. But then Robocop, with the guidance of his partner, defuses it. And then once after defusing the bomb, you go through a crack in the wall. This is so you can try to kill all the remaining robbers that have fled from the scene. And then you get a radio call from the Vulture's leader, who escaped in the last chapter. And also a trophy for finishing this chapter. In this chapter, you're going through an abandoned mall trying to pursue Wendell Ananowski. He is the guy who shot Lewis in the beginning of the game. This chapter mostly consists of you just tripping straight balls for about 10 minutes straight. It even goes so far to put you in your old house talking to your old family, and also a younger version of yourself. And that's when you wake up and see Wendell Ananowski sitting right in front of you. And then you grab and then capture him, putting him in prison. And then once the cinematic is done, you get a trophy for finishing the chapter. And then almost immediately after, I got a trophy for upgrading the skill to the max level. In the next chapter, it has you go to the prison. This is because Wendell Ananowski has escaped, also freeing a lot of the inmates in the prison. This leads you to the courtyard where you find Ananowski, but since he's using his lighter, this disables Robocop. He then tells Robocop that he's gonna kill Lewis, but first we get 2 trophies, one for completing the chapter and the other one for getting an A grade on any chapter. And then you make your way to the hospital and find that Lewis is safe and unharmed. You then get word that Ananowski is going after Dr. Blanche. This is because she has documents about Robocop. Ananowski then sets the building on fire and we get a trophy for saving a cat. You then trace a transmission signal to the sewers, and then you find out that Ananowski has been using this place as a base. We then encounter a new enemy type of the game, that being a turret. There is also a trophy tied to the turret. This is for hacking the turret, making it shoot the enemies. Then while in the sewer, you learn that OCP is trying to kill Robocop, working alongside Ananowski. This makes Robocop go to the OCP headquarters. Then once making it to the top of the building, Robocop finds a TV. This TV shows the plans to make a Robocop 2.0, and then you go upstairs to try to arrest Becker. But that plan doesn't work because he explains to you that he isn't the person who made Afterlife. That was his recently deceased father. You also get a trophy for finishing the chapter. He then hosts an expo to show off all his new technologies and also to remember his recently deceased father. Then the expo goes sideways because Wendell Ananowski hacks all the droids. This leads Robocop to protect Becker, but also at the same time trying to go after Wendell Ananowski. You then meet Wendell Ananowski and he uses his lighter on you. He then leaves, but the effects are still showing. Robocop is glitching out everywhere. You then wake up defenseless facing him. He then gives you the lighter and then basically tells you good luck. Robocop then wakes up in the police station. They then take the GPU out of his head to try to stop his glitches. This then works, making Robocop wake up. Then Wendell Ananowski basically goes on the news and says that he's gonna rule Detroit. You and the police station go out on the streets to try to protect Detroit. This is because all the gangs are pissed at Wendell Ananowski because they betrayed raid them, making a civil war between the robots and the vultures. You then get word that the vultures are gonna blow up the bridge, but before they can do it, Robocop defuses the bombs. Then after, you're sent to a secret lab. This leads you to the construction area of New Detroit. You then have to fight your way until you find Wendell and Anowski. And like when I mean fight, I had 57 minutes of straight fighting. You then make it to the top of the building where the army leaves. This is because Anowski wasn't gonna pay them. This leads to Anowski trying to deploy his droids. This doesn't work, however, because the remote is destroyed. This then leads Anowski to try to flee for a weapon, leading to his death. And we also get a trophy. And then once after going to the station, you learn that something has entered OCP. I lost a clip, but you learn that the Aftermath project was a success. The old OCP boss transferred his consciousness into a robot. You then fight him through all floors of the building until he is defeated. You then have the choice to leave the building and keep it alive, or sacrifice yourself to save the city. And then with the two choices, I chose to kill it. And then right after, the building collapses. And then Robocop somehow makes it out alive. And then after a couple of cutscenes, you get the final chapter related trophy of the game. Now we have to go for the cleanup for the rest of the trophies. The first trophy I went for is killing all the robots in chapter 6 in under 10 minutes. And then the next trophy is for completing a crime scene in chapter 2. And then finally, the last trophy of the game is for finding a hidden OCP container in the top of the railway. Thank you guys for watching the video, and hopefully you guys have a great day.